All right, we just talked about tendency tones. The two tendency tones you guys are always looking out for are the leading tones and the sevenths on chords. Now, we talked about exceptions where you can, where you don't have to resolve the leading tone. What were those exceptions? So you're going from 5 to 1. Where in this style are you permitted not to resolve a leading tone?
I think you said in the inner voice.
Yes. If you have the leading tone in the inner voice, like in the alto and the tenor, you can get away with not resolving it. And in fact, Bach does that a lot, especially at cadences, to get full-bodied, complete 5 to 1 chords at cadences. But Bach also does this in the body of a piece. But you must always resolve a leading tone when it's sticking out in an outer voice. In the soprano and in the bass, you got to resolve it. Now, sevenths, you always have to resolve the sevenths on the chords. How do sevenths on a chord resolve, by the way?
Down?
Yeah, they always resolve down by step. Now, we got to talk about dominant seventh and non-dominant seventh. We're going to go over that quickly. Here's a section on your homework about that. Okay, let's talk about dominant seventh and all of its inversions. Okay, 5/7 should resolve to a 1 in root position, right? But if you are strict about resolving the 5/7 in that you resolve the leading tone and you resolve the seventh, which you always have to do, you will end up with an incomplete 1 chord. All right, you will have a chord without a fifth in it. Would that be appropriate for a final cadence? No, it wouldn't. So in the case, if you're using 5/7 to 1 in the body of a piece, it's okay to resolve to an incomplete 1 chord. And that happens when you resolve the leading tone and the seventh. You're just going to have a 1 chord that's missing a fifth. That's in root position. But what Bach does, when he wants a perfect authentic cadence with a 5/7 to 1, he usually leaves the leading tone in an inner voice and doesn't resolve the leading tone in the inner voice. And that helps him to yield a complete 1 chord in a final cadence. All right, so just something to look out for when you're dealing with 5/7 in root position going to 1. Okay, 5/6/5, that resolves to what type of 1 chord? Well, in 5/6/5, the leading tone is in the bass. So that will give us just another 1 chord in root position. 5/6/5 always resolves to 1 in root position. Something about first inversion chord in root position. At the end of the piece, you want 2 stable chords. Root position chords, when you move from one root position to a chord, it's like a sumo wrestler moving from making one step to another. They're big, assertive, powerful steps. But first inversion chords are more like ballerinas moving from one chord to the other. It's more fluid, so it's not as assertive. At the end of a piece, in this style of music, you want big, assertive chord motions in final cadences. So 5/6/5 to 1 will give you a smooth motion to 1 and a smooth motion to a complete 1. But since both chords are not in root position, you don't get that dong dong feel at the end of the piece. Okay, great for the body of the piece, not for cadence. 5/4/3 can go to 2 types of 1s. What are they?
1 and 1/6.
Yeah, it could either go to 1 and 1/6, and in fact, it's a useful passing chord. When you want to extend the sound of 1 without repeating 1 right after the other, you can insert a 5/4/3 in between, and you'll get 2 versions of 1 to extend the sound, the sound of the tonic chord. All right. Okay, 5/4/2 can only resolve to 1 place. That's when the seventh of the chord is in the bass.
1/6.
Yes, 1/6. You got it. Could only go to 1/6. Okay. Now, in regards to voicing 5 chords, you don't need to prepare the sevenths of 5 chords, but you do have to prepare the sevenths on non-dominant chords. So if you want to add a seventh to 2 or to any other, to 4, to 6, to any other chord that isn't 5, you have to prepare the seventh. What does it mean to prepare the seventh? How do you prepare the seventh on a non-dominant chord? It has to be, the seventh of the chord has to be approached in a particular way in the previous chord. There are 2 ways that you can approach the seventh on a non-dominant chord.
Is it by step?
By step is one of the ways. What's the other way?
Contrary motion?
Not by contrary motion, by step and by common tone, like a suspension. All right. So you prepare the sevenths on non-dominant chords. You have to approach them this way. You approach them by step from the previous chord or by common tone from the previous chord, just carrying over a note from the previous chord. You don't have to do this with 5/7, but you do have to do this with things that are not dominant chords, non-chord tones. So we have passing tones. Let's abbreviate. Why not? Passing tones, neighbor tones, escape tones or échappés, appoggiaturas. Is it APP or AP? I don't know how they abbreviate. I don't remember how they abbreviate appoggiaturas. And retardations and suspensions. I don't know why I spelled that off, but okay. Passing tones. Are they accented or unaccented? Or can they be both? Accented meaning they can happen on the strong part of a beat, and unaccented meaning that they happen on weak parts of the beat. So can they happen on onsets of the beats, or do they happen on the offset of the beat? Yes, yeah, both. Usually you'll encounter them as unaccented. Like here's the beat, and this would be the passing tone, an unaccented passing tone. But passing tones can also be accented. All right. How do you approach and leave a passing tone? You approach it by step, and then you leave it by step in the same direction. Yes, that's a passing tone. All right. Let's talk about neighbor tones. Accented or unaccented? Well, unaccented. It happens off of the beat. All right. How do you approach a neighbor tone and how do you leave it? It's approached by step and left by step in the opposite direction. So it basically helps you to return to the same note you started with. All right. So it's approached by step and left by step in the opposite direction. So passing tones, you approach by step and leave by step in the same direction. It's taking you somewhere. The neighbor tones, you approach by step and you leave by step in the opposite direction. And what that does, it leads you back to the note that you started with. It's definitely just an embellishment. How about escape tones? I was told by a music theory teacher once that Bach doesn't use escape tones in his chorales, and then I went through one, I analyzed one and found a few. So he does use escape tones. So what is it? Are escape tones accented or unaccented?
Non-accented.
Always unaccented, yeah. And these guys are approached by step and left by leap in the opposite direction. Again, they're approached by step and left by leap in the opposite direction. That's why they're called escape tones. How about appoggiaturas? Are these accented or unaccented? All right, guys, appoggiaturas are always accented. They're approached by leap and left by step in the opposite direction. Again, appoggiaturas, they're approached by leap and left by step in the opposite direction. To save some time here, guys, if you need examples for non-chord tones, these tones that do not belong to a chord, for embellishing a chord, there's tons of stuff online about this. You could even do a general Google search, and you will find tons of music theory examples, from good music theory pages on non-chord tones with musical examples. All right. How about retardations? They're similar to suspensions. They're approached by the same note, and they happen on the strong beat. So they're always accented non-chord tones, but they resolve in the opposite way of suspensions. Instead of resolving down by step, they resolve up by step. All right, now let's talk about suspensions. Bach loves suspensions, and whenever he can, he chains suspensions together. There's some beautiful chorales where he just goes from one interconnected suspensions, one suspension to the next. All right, he loves suspensions. All right. Now, all suspensions are non-chord tones, but there are two types of suspensions. There are consonant suspensions, and there are dissonant suspensions. All right. Consonant suspensions form a consonant interval with the bass note or root that you're measuring the suspension from. The most common type of consonant suspension is 6/5. 6 is not a chord tone, but a 6 is considered to be a consonant interval, so they consider it to be a consonant suspension. All right. What are our dissonant suspensions? And by the way, dissonant suspensions are way more satisfying than consonant suspensions because you're using intervals that create a rub. All right. What are our dissonant suspensions? You guys remember? 9/8, 4/3, some most popular ones, and 7/6. All right. 9/8 and 4/3. These numbers are measured above the root of the chord, which is in the bass. These are root position measurements. But 7/6 suspensions happen over first inversion chords. All of these are dissonant suspensions. They're way more satisfying than consonant suspensions, but Bach uses them all because he loves interconnecting suspensions together and using as many as possible in his chorales. All right. In as far as, okay, so suspensions, approach by the same note and left by step downwards. Oh, I'm missing one dissonant suspension, 2-3. What's special about the 2-3 suspension? So for all of these other ones, we're measuring these intervals or compound version of these intervals above a bass note. But with 2-3, 2-3 is a suspension that happens in the bass voice. The bass voice contains a suspension. And so you're actually measuring a second and a third between the bass and a voice above it. All right, so 2-3 suspension, that's our bass suspension. It's the only bass suspension.